In this video, I'm going to show you how you can create a win condition where the player has completed a set of tasks and now the game will print out a victory message. So the key here is we just have to keep track of what the player has done. So when they carry out an action that is required to win the game, we keep a record of it. And we're going to do that using a variable. And then we'll use an event, and the events are over here on the Events tab, and this is where we can create a function that's going to run every turn. So every turn, this code is going to run, and it's going to check, have all the conditions for the victory, or for winning the game, been met. And if that condition is true, then we'll print out a victory message. So let's take a quick look at the little scenario that I've got set up here. I've got two rooms, and in one room I've got three buttons: a blue button, a green button, and a red button. And in order to win, we're going to say the player has to push all three buttons and then go outside. So that's a very kind of weird, surreal thing, but the point is there's three tasks that the player has to do, and then they have to go to a location, and then we're going to check to see if all the buttons have been pushed and the player is outside. So let's make some variables here. And what I'm going to do is make a variable called, red underscore pushed, and I'm going to set it to 0 as its default value. And what did I have? I had red, green, and blue. And I'm going to make one for each color: red, green, there we go, and blue. So these are going to start off as 0, and when the player pushes one of those buttons, we'll set them to 1, or not 0. I'd say 1. 1 would make a lot of sense. So we're going to use these to track, has the player done something in the game? And so let's write a function now, and I'm going to call it press red button, or press underscore red underscore button. And so this function is going to run when the player presses the button. So let's print a message here. I'm just going to say click, or I don't know, we'll just print out click in capital letters. And now what do I want to do? I want to set that variable red pressed to 1. So this used to be 0, now it's 1, right? This is that variable. Oh, red pushed, sorry. Let's say red pushed. There we go. Our variable has changed from a 0 to a 1. So we can track, we've now captured the fact that the red button has been pushed. And then maybe I'll make another one here. Press blue button, add. And what I'll do is I'll just copy the code out of here. Control C, Control V. Now in here, I need to change the value of this variable. I'm going to say the blue button has been pushed. I'm going to set that to 1. And now let's add another function. Press green button. And let's paste in that code, and I'm going to set that variable green pushed to 1. Okay, so I've created these functions now, but they don't actually do anything because they're not hooked up to a sentence. So these functions are there for us to use, but now we have to tie them to a particular command that the user is going to type. So let's go do that now. I'm going to go to sentences, and under the verb, I'm going to find push or press. There we go. And let's say the first object, or the first noun, is the blue button. What do I want to do? I want to call the press blue button function instead of whatever built-in action there is. And there isn't a built-in action for pushing things. So what we're going to do is create a function to handle pushing the blue button. All right. So now let's do the same for the green button. I'm going to change this to push the green button. I'm going to say, when that happens, call the press green button button function instead. And then let's do that for red. Is it push the red button? Call the press red button function instead. Add. So now we've said when the player types push the blue button, call our push or our press blue button function. I probably should have just decided use push or press. So now let's go to verb checks here, and for push or press, let's make sure that for something we want to push or press, we have to supply a noun, and let's make sure we see that thing. There we go. I think I might update Lantern just to add those by default. All right, so what we're saying here is when the player tries to push something, make sure that they're actually supplying a noun, a thing to push, and then make sure that they can see that noun. The D-obj is the direct object of the sentence. That's the first noun that the parser can find in the sentence. All right, so now we've just said in order to push something, you have to see it. And to use the verb push, you have to actually specify what you want to push. All right, so now let's just run this thing here. Okay, there we go. And let me type the word vars here, and you'll see what it's going to do is dump out, if you type vars like that, it dumps out the variables in your game. And you can see green pushed is set to 0, blue pushed is set to 0, and red pushed is set to 0. So watch this. Now if I type push red, it says click. And notice I didn't have to say push red button because red was enough of a word to be able to uniquely identify that object. If I had said push button, it would say, I don't know which one you mean, because there's three objects that the word button could be associated with. Now let's type vars and see what happened. You can see that the red pushed is now set to 1, because what it did was it ran our function, press red button, and it set red pushed to 1. All right, so now let's just to verify that this is all good, let's try push red, push blue, push green. Okay, now if I type vars, we should see that all of those variables have been set to 1. Red pushed, green pushed, blue pushed, all set to 1. Awesome. Okay, so now what we've done is we've captured that all of those buttons have been pushed or pressed. So now what we need is an event. We need that code that runs every turn that says, hey, has the victory condition been met? And for this example, we have to say the player is going to be outside and they pushed all 3 buttons. So let's make an event, and we'll call it like, check for victory check or something. I don't know, victory check or win check or something like that. Now, so what we're going to do, let's first of all test that the player is in the right place, right? So we have to say that the player has to go outside to win the game. So the player has to be outside. So let me give myself an if statement here. I'm going to type if and hit tab twice. There's my if statement. So how do I test if the player is in that location called outside? Well, that's the player's location, the player's parent, the player's holder. So I'm going to type player, PL, tab. That will expand to player. I'm going to hit the dot, and then location, dot L, and hit tab twice. Player's location, or the player's parent, all the same thing, is equal to outside, which is the name of that room, outside. All right, so let's test if the player is outside. Now we could put all of this in one statement here, but I think just for the sake of kind of keeping it more manageable, I'm going to put a second part in here. I'm going to break this up. So this statement is going to test, is the player outside? And if the player is outside, then we're going to do the code. We're going to execute the code between these curly braces. So what are we going to put in here? Well, let's put in a check to see if those variables are 1. So how do we test if all 3 of those variables are 1? So in English, if we were describing this, we'd say if red pushed is 1, and blue pushed is 1, and green pushed is 1, then we've won the game. So how do we specify and? How do we say and? And that's shift 7. That's the double ampersand, like that. Double ampersand means and. When you see that, that means and. That means and in a whole lot of programming languages. So now we're going to test if all those variables are set to 1. So I'll give myself another if statement, and I'm going to say if red pushed is equal to 1 and blue pushed, is it pushed or pressed? Pushed. Yep, it is pushed. And blue pushed is equal to 1 and green pushed is equal to 1. So all of these conditions have to be true. If all of these conditions are true, if this condition is true, and this condition is true, and this condition is true, then this entire expression is true. So this is true. If this is 1 and that's 1 and that's 1, then I'm going to do the code inside the curly braces. If any of these are false, this whole expression will become false, and we won't execute the code in the curly braces. So now what we want to do is now we can print out our victory message. Now there's going to be one little thing that pops up here that we're going to have to talk about. So I'm just going to print you win. There you go. All right, now watch what happens. Let's save the game here. Now let's run it. Oh, it says unknown variable green pushed. Okay, so I forgot, just misspelled it. Fix that. Let's run that. There we go. Okay, so push red, push green, push blue. All right, so now if I type vars, I should see that all those variables are set to 1. And now I'm going to go east to go outside, right? So if I type L, there's an exit to the east. I can't go that way. Why can't I go that way? All right, let's look at our control room. And east, we'll say east goes outside. There we go. And outside, we'll say west goes into the control room. Save that. And this is why you should do your map stuff in Trizboard. Okay, push blue, push red, push green. All right, now, so I've pushed all of those buttons. You see, we've captured that those buttons have been pushed. Now I'm going to go east. I'm going to go outside, and it says, you win. All right, and why is it pitch dark? Because I didn't click the little lit box. Now, watch what happens if I type look. It is pitch dark. You win. You win. You win. All right, so every time I successfully enter a command, it's going to say you win. All right, why? Why is it doing that? First of all, let's check the little light box on these rooms. So room 1 should be lit. Control room and outside, they're both lit. All right, now what's going on? Well, let's go back to our test here, or our event. Every time we're outside and these conditions are true, we've won the game. So what we really need is some way of saying, well, if the player's here and this is true, print out the victory message if they haven't already won. So only do this once. If they haven't won already, then check to see are they outside and is the victory condition clear. Oh, great. I got a dog like barfing on a tennis ball. That's great. Okay. So let's, I'm sure Snagit captured that. So now let's go to our variables again and notice that we've got this built-in variable called game over. This variable is here for exactly this situation. So what we want to do is it starts off as 0, and when we win the game, we want to set it to 1. So what we want to do here is say game over is now 1. We've won the game. Flag that we've won. Okay, now what will this change? This will change nothing because we're never actually testing game over. What we could do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add another if statement. If tab tab, and I'm going to take this. I'm going to cut it, paste it in here, and I'm going to highlight all of this and hit the tab key, tab it all over. Block tab works in Lantern. Yes, it's awesome. And what I'm going to say is if game over is equal to 0, so if the game is not over, is game over? So if the game is not over, right, because game over is 0, if we're in that condition where we started in, where game over was set to 0, that's when we want to check for winning, because we haven't won yet. So if game over is set to 0, as it is when the game starts, then we want to do our win check. Is the player outside? Yeah. Has the player pushed all the buttons? Yep. And then once we do that, we're going to print out you win, and we're going to set game over to 1. So the next time we enter a command and we test to see if we've won, what's game over now? Well, we set it to 1. So is 1 equal to 0? Nope. So are we going to do this? Nope. We're going to skip right over it. We're not going to do this code because once we've won, game over is not 0 anymore because we set it to 1. So we're not going to do this code. We're going to step over it. So what we've done is we've created this mechanism that allows us to get the game over message only once. So let's just verify that that works. And we'll say push red, push blue, push green. Okay, now let's type vars. And you can see here, game over is 0. We've pushed all our buttons, so those are all 1. Now let me go east. It says outside. Okay, great. You win. Nice. Let me type vars. And if we do that, you'll see game over is now set to 1 because we said when you print out the victory message, set game over to 1. So we flagged that we've won the game. The game's over, and we're not going to keep getting that message anymore because when we go to test this condition, is game over 0? This condition isn't true anymore because we set game over to 1. So we're not going to do the code in the curly braces, and nothing's going to happen. And that's how we get that victory message once and only once. So if you've got some sort of situation in your game where you're testing, you got to test multiple conditions. You have the option of using multiple if statements, or you have the option of using and operators. The and operator like that, the double ampersand. If you wanted to say one of these things has to be true, you just have to push one button. Let's do that. I'm going to use, for that, I use a different symbol. I'm going to use the double pipe, which is right above the enter key on my laptop here. The double pipe means or. So what this says now is if the red button has been pushed, or the blue button has been pushed, or the green button has been pushed, if any one of those is true, then this whole expression is true. If one of them is true, then that expression is true, and then we'll do the code in the curly braces. So in this case, I just have to push one button to win and then go outside. So let's just prove that that works. Launch player, I'm going to say push blue, and let's go outside, east, you win, right? So let's type vars. So blue is red pushed 1, green pushed 1, or blue pushed 1? Yes, blue pushed is 1. So so there we've created a condition where as long as we do one of those things, we win. Typically, though, you'll be using and for this stuff because you're going to want to force the player to complete a certain set of tasks. So there you go. This is how you can create sort of a situation or a mechanic in your game where you have to do multiple things to win the game, or test if the player has multiple items, or some combination of that. The trick is you just have to have some way of flagging that the player has done those actions, and that's where the sentences come in, and that's where the variables come in. So make variables for each of those conditions each of those things that the player has to do. Set them to 0. And then in your functions, when the player does those things, carries out those actions, set those variables to 1. And then have an event that checks to see if all the victory conditions are 1. And if they are, well, then you've won. And you want to handle the victory message and then set this flag so you don't keep getting the victory message. So there it is. There's how to create kind of an end game scenario that that forces the player to complete a certain set of actions in order to win the game.